This is a 1963 Honda CA95 engine. I tore it down a few weeks ago and I've been going through it. I actually found the motorcycle at a commercial egg ranch and it had clearly been sitting for, oh man, probably 20 years or so. The gas tank was completely rusted off of it, but I kicked the engine over and it was free. It wasn't frozen up. So I decided to tear into it and clean it up. Now, I've already had it all the way down to I had the case split. I had everything out of it. I checked all the bearings. I've replaced all of the seals. Here, let me show you some of the seals in here. Like all of the seals in it so that they won't be leaking. Went through, cleaned everything up. It was very gunky and corroded inside. And anyway, when I was putting the case back together, there's no gasket where the case splits, which is right here all the way around. Kind of splits horizontally. There was just remnants of an old silicone based material, so I cleaned it all up and I put this material on it. It's a gasket maker silicone based material, and I was torquing down all of the bolts that hold the case together, and of course the very last one and the very last round of torque right here, it sheared off. Now I'm confronted, well, do I split the case back apart and drill it out and tap a new one in there, or do I leave it together? Well, I decided to leave it together, but that's kind of a problem because typically, like if this were the bolt that sheared off, we would take the center punch and hit it, and then I would take a drill and drill it out, and then I would retap it. But in this case, I didn't really want to take the case apart. I wanted to leave it together because I had all that gasket material in there. I put the transmission together, which is like, I don't know, I'm sure they had special tools in the factory, but I don't have them, so it was a lot of work to get it all together and in the right spot. So I decided to drill it out in place, but I have a really hard time center punching that, or even knowing if I'm on the center of the bolt when I hit it in there. I can feel it, but I just know from experience that I'm going to have a hard time keeping that drill bit on top of that bolt. So I came up with what I think is a solution. I found this little bushing. It's a 5mm inside diameter and a 7mm outside diameter, and it fits right in that hole. And I'm going to put it on the end of this drill bit so you can see it. So this is a 5mm drill bit and it fits in that bushing perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to put it in this hole and use it as a guide so that it holds the drill bit exactly in place. Let's get this centered up. Now this hole is a little bit elongated. It's probably more than 7mm, maybe 7.2 or 3. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that JB Weld down there on the left hand side, and I'm going to fill the hole with it. I'm going to slide this bushing in there and basically lock it into place so it's centered. And then the bushing will act as a guide, slide across the drill bit, or the drill bit will run through the bushing, and that will hold my bit straight in place. That's my theory. So now we're going to do it. Oil and stuff in there. We want that JB Weld to stick as well as possible. Now I've put a little bit of acetone in this little, I don't know what you call it, hypodermic or anyway, I put a little acetone in there, and I've got some Q-tips, and let's just clean her out here. And my JB Weld, we're going to mix up a little bit of it. It's a bit cool in the basement, so this JB Weld is kind of stiff. That's okay. Let me mix it up, it'll warm up just fine. Get a little warmth on this thing here. You gotta love this JB Weld. It's real handy. I used to race motorcycles in the desert, and we always carried JB Weld in our backpack. I hit a rock one time and cracked a case way the heck out by Red Mountain, California, in the middle of nowhere. And I hit it so hard, I stopped and looked at the bike, and there was just oil dribbling out of the case. And I go, man, that's bad news, because I was never going to get back. Probably 50 miles from the nearest pit. Rolled it over on its side, wiped it off with my glove, took out the JB Weld and put it on the case. And it's that quick JB Weld. Ended up finishing 5th place in that race, even after I waited to get that JB Weld to dry. So now I'm using just an old zip tie here to get that in there. And I've mixed it up pretty thoroughly, of course, just like the directions say. And getting that in there, nice. And here we go with the little bushing. I'm going to stick it on the end of the drill bit there. And we're going to slide it down in there. And I'm going to, there's so much material in there, it's wanting to, yeah, it's oozing out. That's all right. It's just centering it for me real nice. Use that bit to kind of work everything in there, get any air bubbles out. And let's just hold that. And I'd say we have success. It's in there. I'm going to wipe the little drill bit off here. There we go. And I'm just going to scrape the top of this off so I don't have a lot of work to do. It's a lot easier to scrape it off while it's wet than it is when it's dry, that's for sure. And the heater just kicked on, sorry about that. It is winter time. And I do live in the National Forest at 6,000 feet elevation, so we got some snow out there last night. Okay, and we're going to let that set up. Everything looks good. Check and get this into that bushing. There we go. And we're going to call that good and leave it alone. We're going to let it set up. The JB Weld has been setting up in that hole right there in the center of the camera with the bushing in it for a good 40 minutes. And I'm going to slide the camera down here, get it in the shade. Now I'm going to pull a flashlight up here and let's get it just right. There you can see the bushing down inside of the hole. It's a 5mm bushing on the inside diameter. The outside diameter is 7mm. This hole right there is a 7mm hole. So I couldn't really use that hole as a guide because the bit for a 6mm tap, which is right here, that you use is a 5.4mm bit. So I have this 5mm bushing in here. I will ultimately drill it out with the 5.4mm, but I'm going to drill the whole entire hole with a 5mm bit first. So let's do that. So the bit's installed on the drill motor, and I've put a piece of tape to indicate the depth that I want to drill to. And that's all the further I'm going to take it down, and I'll stop when the tape hits the case. going to stop for a minute and tell you that I do have metal shards coming up, metal shavings. I guess that's probably the appropriate term. Coming up, and I know that I'm on top of the bolt because it's hard. If I were drilling into the aluminum of the block, it would go really quickly, and so no, we're definitely drilling into the bolt, and it seems to be holding it in place. I'm happy about that. I finished drilling out the hole with the 5mm bit in the bushing. You can see the bushings in there. It's still intact. It didn't really even wear at all. I thought it might wear a little bit. One thing that happened is I didn't realize from my perspective, from where I could see from the outside of the engine, that bolt went all the way through the other case. It's a hole that goes all the way through the other case. So if I shine a flashlight in the case, you can see that the hole goes all the way through. So I know that I got it centered. I know that everything's correct. And now it's going to be a matter of tapping that hole. I will drill it out with a 5.4mm, and then I'm going to run a 6mm tap through there. The tap is in the hole and it's ready to be turned. This is the tap handle here. And the problem is that when I try to put it on the tap, it interferes with the case right here and puts the tap at an angle. So we don't want that. What we're going to do is we're just going to turn the tap with this little wrench, and I'll put a little pressure on the top with this handle. I'm just going to put the hole on there, press down, and I will turn the tap with this wrench and drive it in. So let's go ahead and tap this hole. This is the 6mm tap, and it's got to come down to about there. I can look at the radius that the bolt sits in. So that's about how deep it has to go. So it's going to bury all the threads in about a 1/4 of an inch. It drops right in. It's a little bit snuggish, but it slides right in. I have this little wrench, and I can kind of just turn it in. And initially I thought that I'd have to put some pressure on the top of it, but the fact of the matter is it's kind of just nice and snug. We might have to drill the hole out for the shoulder of the bolt, but it feels like it's pulling itself in just fine. Yeah, it's pulling itself in just fine. And not too worried about the pressure. We'll see when it gets down to, yeah, it's just going to start cutting right here. You can feel it. I want it bit. Now, I'm not cutting new threads. I've really just found my way into the old threads, and I'm cleaning them out. Now, I've swabbed the inside of that with a little bit of oil, and I stuck that down there and swabbed it so that there would be some lubrication for when it's cutting. Let's just keep going here. Still have to go above those threads about up to here before it's bottomed out, so let's see if it gets a little tighter. You can feel it every once in a while when you turn on it. It's grabbing, yeah, like right there, it's grabbing a little something and cleaning it out. That's good. Because I'm cleaning it out, I don't know if I'm going to have to back it out or not. Definitely getting a little resistance now. She's cutting very nicely. And again, like I said, I wanted to put the handle on it, but it interfered. The handle's right here. It just interferes. It's just offset a little bit and would drive that tap in crooked, which we don't want. And the tap is really following the old threads and the holes left behind from drilling out the bolt. And she's going in very nicely. It's just going to be, say, about 10 more turns maybe. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not quite bottomed out. This tap is very flat on the on the end. It has just a little bevel, so it's going to bottom out, and I'm going to stop turning it in when it bottoms out. And that bushing, why do I say "and" all the time? Anyway, the bushing I left in there, but I drilled out to 5.4 millimeters for this tap, and that took most of the bushing away. Left a little bit in there, but that's okay. It's now up where the shoulder of the boat goes. Maybe a little bit of it got threaded, but that's okay. It doesn't hurt anything because we didn't put it down where the threads go. We left it up top, and this side of the case is getting the threads, and it feels like, yeah, bottomed out right there. So let's back it out nice and easy. Yeah, everything's turning nicely, so let's see if we don't get some nice metal shavings to come up with the tap. Probably going to get left behind. Let's see. Tap went in nice and straight, so we know that drill worked really well. I mean, the bushing guiding the drill worked really well. I may run this on out and fast forward the video. We'll see. Oh, it's nice and loose now. It's just walking out with, oh, it's bringing up shavings with it. That's nice. Really went in nice and smooth. Just enough resistance. I can run it out by hand now. So here we go on the final step of this journey, and it's this little 6mm bolt. I'm going to drop it in there. Okay. And let's get a ratchet. Here we go. Run it down. Starting to snug up. And I've always find this satisfying after you struggle with one of these bolts to finally run it in and have it tighten up and do its job. And this is going to be here for a long, long time. This little engine had a lot of wear on it. There's a lot of dings. Here it is, and that is snug. A little more bumpy. Yeah, that's that. She's in there, all down. Gotta love it. And that's how I drilled out a broken off bolt inside of a case without taking it apart.